Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Lights on Data show. My name is George Freakan, and I am your co-host today. And today we're going to talk about marketing and product analytics. And to do we have here Jean-Sebastien Provost, Ph.D. He's a data scientist with over 12 years of experience performing data analysis and really applying his analytical skills to uncover hidden trends in data that tell stories about behavior. Most importantly, he's developed a deep understanding of how insights from data can leverage business decisions. Definitely a really crucial skill to have in his current role as a data scientist at Noble. And Jean-Sebastien is also a mentor, a speaker, and a member of the board of directors at datacan. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that. But first, let's welcome Jean-Sebastien.
Thank you very much, George, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. And such an important topic to cover, marketing and product analytics, and we're going to look forward to learning more about each one of them and how they differ. But first, I think we all want to learn more about your story, your journey.
I have a very particular journey that actually led me to where I am right now. So as you were saying a little bit earlier, I have a background in science. I have a degree in cognitive neuroscience, which is like a little bit far away from data science, but actually they're quite connected in so many ways. So I used to study cognitive processes and how they relate to brain structure. So really I was doing research and trying to understand how certain behaviors, certain cognitive behavior are related to brain activity. So really it was about understanding the motivational aspect and which comes first. So of course, all behavior originates from the brain, obviously, but then you have some sort of feedback and you can understand a little bit more about the underlying components of each behavior. I got introduced to data science when I was doing research on the West Coast, and some of my former colleagues switched from academia and went working into the industry as a data scientist. And it got me really interested into how you could actually translate these skills. And as it turns out, you essentially what changes is just the actual data, but the ultimate goal could be more or less the same. It's to understand what is sounds attracting for a consumer, for a user, that will basically drive a specific behavior. So if you look into how would you choose to decide on whether you're going to purchase a product, one product A versus product B, it's all about the underlying motivation that you would have to purchase one product over the other. So the whole aspect of connecting behavior that way with another sets of data, but still being able to study motivation, it got me very fascinated. And this is when I started to look into a little bit more about how I could move into the field of data science. And of course, there were some skills that were missing back then, so that I needed to learn. And I learned pretty much coding, machine learning from scratch on my own, but also through following online courses, following textbooks in order to have a good, solid understanding. And yeah, and this is how it linked the whole my own background to marketing. Marketing is about connecting to, it's about introducing yourself to a potential user. It's about presenting yourself, and it's about understanding what is the particular need of the user in order to address it and provide them with something that is useful, either useful information, either useful features of your product that could be beneficial for your user, and in order to ultimately convert him or her to your product. So it's about looking at behavior from a different perspective, but ultimately it's all about understanding human motivation.
I thought it was very interesting, everything that you've described there, and especially on the cognitive piece. And I was wondering if everything kind of falls under cognitive analytics overall as the umbrella.
Yes and no. It's a little bit, so of course, the ultimate goal would be to do so, to fully understand customer behavior. Unfortunately, because of the kind of data that you're having or that you can collect, it could be a little bit trickier to do. But that being said, ultimately, when it comes down to marketing analytics, but the same thing for product analytics as well, is that one of the goals is to come up with a specific persona or personas for your users. So can you actually collect data or at least understand what is the typical user for a specific aspect of your product.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, so if I give like an example, so a friend of mine is working with this product in which people are using streams to share information. And of course, when you register to the product, so you can just directly go to the streaming platform and use it. And some people are actually doing that. They're just logging in, using it. And some people takes a little bit more time to do. So you can see this in two different ways. You can see, well, I have just a bunch of users who are just converting and this is awesome. Or you can say, hey, let's look into the differences in how they convert. And is there an actual difference? And you can actually see that there are two groups. There are a group of people who are just using it and a group of people who are taking more time. But what is the specific aspect of the people who are using more time? What was found is that these people are actually spending a little bit more time into understanding the technicalities of the features that they can use. And so they're more analytical in their approach of using that particular product. So knowing that you have these kind of users, what you could do is that you can actually provide them with information that would satisfy their curiosity in terms of maybe, I wouldn't say hidden features. There's always like features in a product that are not necessarily as obvious. So you can share potential information. You can share new ways of using your product that would be more satisfactory for them. And so ultimately, it's all about driving the engagement. So yes, you can't necessarily get too many cognitive information, but if you can derive some of these aspects from the data, that could help you build personas and then provide material that will be more adequate for specific personas for your product.
Thank you, Jean-Sebastien. Is it that a lot of this data now mostly comes from the online medium and not as much from the surveys or just one-to-one interactions or group sessions and with a more traditional way of gathering this information?
So information comes both ways. Depending on where you are into when you're going to put your product online or basically in your product development stages. So you can do different approach. So informational interviews, survey, focus groups in which you ask the user their opinion about specific aspect of your product. All of these different ways of getting information is usually used as well as following digital data, collecting how are users using your product, what are the principal bottlenecks or the crucial bottlenecks that you need to address if you can find them. And ultimately, you can get some information about who they are, where they're living, their geolocation. Nowadays, it could be a little bit trickier to get more information unless you specifically ask them, but sometimes it's a trade-off. You don't want to ask them too many questions before they start using your product, because otherwise, first of all, people would not necessarily feel comfortable sharing information, especially in these days and age. But also it could, and ultimately that could just drive them away. So you don't want that. You want to make sure to simplify. If you want to use a product, most of the time is you just want to go online, click and use it, and you don't want them to know everything about you. There are some subtle ways for you to gather information, but you want to make sure that to understand that it's a trade-off. You can let them use your product with minimal information about them, but if you decide to have a little bit more information, then you could lose some of your potential users. So you need to think about that.
So is it fair to say that product analytics is then a way to make better decisions on improving your product by measuring and analyzing really that user behavior, that user feedback when it comes to using that product?
Absolutely. I think it is a fair way of describing what product analytics is. You were saying it's about analyzing how your users will engage with your product. Most of the time, so if you think about a digital product, so let's say we take Lights On Show website, for instance, and I saw that you have a store. So let's just say the ultimate goal of when people are going on your website is for you to have them buy a t-shirt, which by the way are awesome. I was actually looking into that. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I actually get one. Of course, the whole aspect of your product, it's about your show. So it's not really about the store, but if it was about the store, so you want to make sure that when someone goes onto your website, that they will go through some sort of an onboarding process that is logical, that will lead to your shop. From an outside perspective, we usually see this as a very linear process, and especially for people who are just creating some website for their own pleasure, usually websites are very straightforward. But when it comes down to websites in which you actually sell products, in which you offer services, so in our case at Noble, we're offering a marketplace, websites are not as linear. There's a lot of different ways that will lead to a conversion, that will lead to a sign-up. And you want to make sure that wherever you click, that you'll get the information needed, but that it will guide you back to where you want your user to go. And it's not about manipulating information. It's just about you're looking for some specific information about my product. So let's say you're on Noble website, you're looking for a real estate agent. Here's where you want to click to be able to get information about how to get a real estate agent. But then ultimately it's, okay, so now that you know how to get one, why don't you sign up and try it out for real and use this experience to understand how beneficial it would be for you to use the platform. And product analytics is about identifying these bottlenecks as well. Where within the onboarding process the process will not be as smooth as possible. And you can see this through how many users are actually going onto your web page? How many users will go from the web page to the second page of your website? How many users will click on that specific button? How come they're not clicking on that button? Is that because the button is not in a good position, it's not right color, or is it because it's not clear what it's going to lead to? This sounds super obvious, but it's not as obvious as you would think when it comes down to building an onboarding process.
Understood that sometimes there's even tools that are able to track the movement of the eye and really do some research and see, okay, where do you look first? Why would that button not work there and would work better somewhere else? So you can really get quite advanced into giving you information on how to best set up that journey of the customer to make sure you have a higher conversion rate. And sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, I think that's a great point you're bringing. Yes, you can use eye tracking device to do that. Of course, when you use eye tracking device, you do this in a controlled environment in such a way that the environment is fully controlled. You have a research team next to you. There's another way that you can use and so there are tools like Full Story that basically record session of users. And what you can actually see is that whenever someone are using a desktop, is that they will have a tendency to underline with the mouse where they are reading or where they are going. So of course, it's not a one-to-one relationship. So you can just sort of use that as an indicator of where they're looking. But you would be surprised how many times you would see an actual user in which you're looking at the session and you see like the mouse just going from left to right, following the text. You're like, oh, okay, so they are actually reading. So I remember the first time that someone told me that, I was like, yeah, that's highly unlikely. And then you start watching session and you're like, oh my God, people are actually doing this. And then while you're looking at this, you're like, oh my God, I'm actually doing it with my mouse when I'm looking at this thing. Oh, okay. So it could be an indicator in some ways. Yeah, so there are some ways to understand where people are looking at, but unfortunately, it's not as straightforward when it comes down to just to the experience that someone will do. However, when it comes down to clicking, that you can keep track. And so if you have multiple buttons on a page, so you can see how many times, let's say, someone is clicking on the back button to just fully understand what was actually happening on the previous page to connect it with the current page. So yeah, so I think. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Jean-Sebastien, I think up until now, I've really equated product analytics with marketing analytics.
So we have a tendency to believe that there could be some overlap, but so marketing analytics is how you're going to bring your user to your platform, and product analytics is how are you going to make the experience of your user on your platform as beneficial as possible. So I see these two fields as complementary to each other, and one being implemented first. Marketing analytics is the one that's being implemented first. So marketing analytics is the analytics for marketing, obviously. But marketing, it's all about, is your user aware of your product? If not, provide them with information that is useful. Then can you actually provide content that is informational for them to drive them, to get them more interested in your product? And then it's about, can you actually understand more about these users to generate some potential leads in which you can target afterwards for have them signing up onto your platform or signing up to purchase your product. And then we have the question of retention. So retention with marketing, it's about providing content that is useful, providing new features that are useful for, not necessarily providing the features, but providing information about the features that will engage even more your user to your platform. So here, with the retention aspect, there's huge overlap with products. So yeah, so it's about providing information, understanding where they are as well, because there's a lot of geolocation aspects related to marketing, especially when you know what is your typical user for your platform. For instance, we're working in real estate. We will be looking at people who would be more likely to buy a house. So of course that could be anyone in some ways, but you have specific groups of people who are more likely to buy houses. So yeah, so this is how marketing and product analytics are working with each other. There's a little bit of overlapping, but the overlapping is not redundant. It's really the information that you would get from product analytics will actually drive the retention aspect of marketing, and understanding also how the user is interacting with your platform, what kind of features is connecting more with the user, can be used for marketing purposes as well. But ultimately, you want to bring people first and then understand how they're using.
And like you said, that overlap is once they got here, you could still market to them to better understand even more about the product. And I assume maybe at that point, you're able to gather even more data on the potential customer and then
Yes.
tailor that message accordingly.
Exactly. Yes, there's a huge feedback loop between both, and marketing can easily benefit from the knowledge that is being gathered from product analytics, for sure.
Just want to take a moment and say hello to our audience. Hello, everybody. Hi, Mohammed, Tejasvi, and hello, Kate, and Pedro, and Ruska, and Deepak, Ravid, of course. We have a lot of people in the audience, and I really appreciate all your time and coming here to learn about product analytics and marketing analytics. Kate has a question here on what are the top 3 metrics in marketing analytics?
Oh, that's a good question. So it really depends on what type of products do you have to offer. If you're selling something, are they actually converting? So the conversion metric is always important. So I will stay very vague, and it's on purpose because it's really based on use case. If I look at what we're doing at Noble, so at Noble, it's a marketplace. So we have users, let's say potential house buyer, potential house seller, who will come into our platform. They can have access to listings if they're looking for houses, but ultimately it's for them to have a safe place to connect with an agent, to connect with a real estate agent. They can go through different profiles of agents and ask them questions to get more information. And ultimately it's for them to pick an agent that is suitable for them, but also for which that there's a true connection, so that both parties wins from this. The agent has someone to work with, and the consumer is comfortable working with them. So for that aspect, you could think just having more consumers signing up to your platform could be an interesting metric to follow. However, it's one thing to have them signing up to your platform. If they're not moving in and connecting with agents, then no transactions will ever happen. And ultimately, this is what you want. You want to make sure that your users are reaching the end goal of what you're offering. So therefore, in our case, the conversion aspect is whether there's a closed deal or not is really important. And it's important why? It's not so much that this is what you want, because you can still have people engaging. It's when you put everything into perspective. If you're spending money on market, that money that you spend, you need to have some sort of return on it. And you get the return once you have a closed deal. And this applies for any product. If Amazon is just doing advertising and no one's ever buying anything from Amazon, then it's not worth it. Or if people are actually buying, but they're just not buying enough to cover the cost of all the marketing efforts that you have, then this is not good either. So you want to make sure to balance your metrics according to what is the main goal in time and space. Some companies do not necessarily have to have marketing and they're still doing
Mhm.
well. So in that
Mhm.
case, just the pure are they purchasing or not is good enough. Are they signing up is good enough. But I would say, just to go back to Kay's question, which I didn't answer, and I know I did not answer it, and I will not necessarily answer it, is that you need to keep in mind that this is an onboarding process. So therefore, you need to have a good amount of people coming in from the first step of your onboarding process that leads to the second step and so on. So you want to
Mhm.
make sure to follow a lot of different metrics for different purposes.
So Arihan has an interesting follow-up question. Actually, he has a few, but let's take that first one. Then, are there any suggestions, any recommendations on when the user journey becomes important? Is it that first
Oh,
step?
sorry. All the time. The user journey should be your main priority all the time, because if there's a bottleneck of your process, your user will just leave your platform or will just not pursue. So you need to keep that in mind. You need to keep the experience as smooth as possible for your user.
And is it always that it's a similar journey that they're having, all of them? Or it could be multiple types?
You could have multiple types, and actually, depending on what kind of products you're offering, you could have specific aspect. You can have specific journey. For instance, if someone goes into Noble and they're looking to sell their properties, then you would have a specific journey for them. You would provide them with information related to the overall health market
Mhm.
for their location. If
Mhm.
someone is looking to so I was talking about selling a house, right? I was talking about purchasing. So if they're looking to sell their property, then you want to make sure to provide information about, let's say, commission from agents, so that what will be the most optimal information that they would get, or that return that they could get from working for a specific agent. So you will provide different information. And also, whenever agents are registering to a platform, of course, you would provide them with a specific onboarding process as well.
Got it. And Dipanshu is wondering if we can say that marketing analytics is done on top of the sales funnel and product analytics spans across all levels of that funnel.
Yes, I think that's a fair way of describing this. The way I see this is that you would have a specific marketing funnel in which you can see how many people are you getting interested in your product. And then you have a funnel for your product itself. How many people are signing up to your platform? How many people are starting to work with an agent? How many people are actually closing a deal? So this is like typical for your product. And then you would have another funnel, which might not necessarily be an actual funnel, but much more of an onboarding process that you will follow for the product analytics. How are we doing in terms of whenever people are logging to the website, how much are they actually following through into reaching the end location in which you want them to go to? So you need to keep track of these three things.
And Hunt was also wondering if there's a general rule of thumb on attributing conversions to marketing effort. Should there be a time limit when a conversion can happen? Again, I assume this is really dependent on a product. If we're buying a house, it's probably not within 7 days, but maybe buying yourself a book could be.
Exactly. And this is where you need to be fine tuned to the business aspect of what you're selling. There will be people who will be registering on the platform and purchase a house within 7 days. There are some, but these are the extreme cases. So usually there's a lifespan or a lifetime value for your user, and it will depend from one product to the other. You can come up with a way to analyze to have, okay, typically it would take a specific amount of days to go from the initial sign up to that next step, and then another specific amount of days. And you can actually gauge, first of all, you can look at that, you can analyze that, and you can gauge your marketing effort accordingly as well. So that once a user are 2 weeks past where they should have spent, then maybe you have a decision to make. That do you continue to spend money on them, or do you start to maybe spend a little bit less effort on marketing for them because they're less likely to convert, and spend more money on new
Mm-hmm.
users in which you can onboard. So it's a decision to make. And also, you don't want to spam people either. It's not, I've registered to this product last year, which I've never used, and it was just like a sign-up process. I didn't pay anything, and I still keep receiving email twice a day. Wow, this is like insane. So you want to make sure to be respectful there as well, because ultimately, and
Yeah.
especially when it comes down to real estate, someone might not be purchasing a house today, but they
Mm-hmm.
might
Mm-hmm.
in 6 months. So
Are you aware of any data sets that are available for individuals and companies to access and try and get some trends out of it and understand, well, for a similar product, they should expect this type of a conversion timeline? Or
ooh,
is it that every company is starting this from scratch, even though they've done a similar thing that others have done? They need to gather their own data and they need to draw their own conclusions.
I'm not familiar of a data set that would apply for different products. However, you can find data sets, let's say for real estate, you can find some census data that will collect this kind of data. So you can have a general idea of what to expect. Some companies will let you access data, not all of them. You can pay for some data as well. And if you're offering something that is unique as what we're doing, you have to understand that the conversion might be different than what you would expect as well, the timeline. So you have to follow what's happening on your platform and then see
Hmm.
how it fits with other similar products. So I think it's a combination of two. So you do have access to some data set that might reflect a little bit of what will be going on, generally speaking, but then you need to look at what's happening with your current user as well and see if you can optimize that, because it's one thing to look at what they're doing, but it's another thing to say that it's not optimal either. So
Got it. Now, Jean-Sebastien, there were quite a few questions on this before the show, and this is why I asked you if we can tackle this part of the topic too, is how can one get into the industry? How can one step into working product analytics, marketing analytics?
yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a typical background, so therefore I think I'm a good example of how to get into the field. I would say there are some technical skills that you have to learn. You need to be comfortable with basic stats. Probability theory, yes. I mean, I'm using it, but I'm using it in such an applied way that sometimes I just don't realize that I'm using it. Machine learning, but machine learning might not be the main focus, but you will, and we do have some models in production that we need to keep track of. But I would say, so of course, you knowledge, a good, decent knowledge of Python,
Mhm.
SQL. So these are just the typical stuff. But then when it comes down to the actual skill set that you would need, I would say half of the job is about solving problems. So you need to have a business sense of what's happening. And this is not something that is easy to get. So there are parts of it that you will get once you start working at a company to understand what's happening with this product, within the industry. You can learn stuff about the industry, of course, on your own, what's happening within the company. So you need to ask a lot of questions once you start working about, hey, what is the conversion rate? How many user do we have? How many new user do we have per month? These kind of metrics that are useful, because once you start doing analysis, you want to make sure that you're within the ballpark. And understanding problem solving is 50% of my work. And then it's basically technical skills. So what I would recommend is understanding concepts like, what is the conversion rate? What are the typical bottlenecks that you can experience when you yourself, you're navigating through a website that would prevent you from converting? We all know websites in which they ask you, oh, you went from page 1 to page 2, and then page 2, there's so much text to read that you're like, oh my God, I don't have time. It needs to be faster. So you close the website and you're like, I'm going to do this some other day. Bad experience, bad user experience. So these are the things you need to look to. Understanding the market you're into, which I already talked about, and being very critical. And this is very important, recognizing when you made a mistake as well.
Mhm.
Sometimes you might not have the good numbers, but people are using these numbers. So you want to make sure to be fine-tuned to that. But I would say the most important thing that got me into this and that made it easier for me is I started reading books about business. There are fantastic books on the topic. So I made a list, which for some reason I can't see them right now. But yeah, books like Lean Analytics from Alistair Kroll, I think, Lean Startup from Eric Ries. This is a great one. This is like probably the Bible of product analytics. But then other books that will get you into the mindset of, let's say, business owners. One of the first books that I've read, which it was influential for me, but not necessarily that drove me towards product analytics, but still that got me interested into the field, was the Self-Made Billionaire Effect by John Sviolka, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me if I. So it's all about understanding that whenever you have a good idea, you need some technical knowledge, but then you also need some creative ideas to make sure to push forward. And you need to keep that in mind whenever you're doing an analysis. You need to be meticulous, but you need to think about how you're going to apply the knowledge also in the future. So there's a small dose of creativity. And the only way that you can train yourself to become better is put yourself to the test. There are tons of business data set out there. Answer small questions and dive deep into it. Immerse yourself, because you will see that once you get a hang of it, some of the questions will, of course, the product will be different, but some of the questions will be the same. And if you have a good overall understanding, it will guide you into navigating through the uncertainty that is product analytics.
Thank you so much for the book recommendations, and thank you so much for sharing all these ideas and what skills somebody should already try and tackle. I also wanted to say hello to our dear friend Harpreet Sahota, who is the reason why you and I know each other. And
Yeah,
it's, I believe it was last year when he was visiting Vancouver, and he organized an outing at a local restaurant, and you and I met, sat to each other, and there you go. Months later, we're here virtually, even though we're in the same city, but
yeah.
having this conversation and me learning from you.
This is great. I'm good to see that Harpreet is doing well.
Likewise, he's of course the best artist of data science.
That is a nice way to put it, and that is a very accurate way of putting it as well.
Jean-Sebastien, can you also tell us a little bit about your involvement with datacan?
Yes. So datacan is a nonprofit organization that was, well, we officially registered in March this year, but it has been going on for, I think they started their activities last summer, or at the end of the summer last year. So just to give you like an overall history about datacan, because it's important, there's this organization in Vancouver, Women in Data Science, the Vancouver chapter. I would assume that most of the people are familiar with Women's in Data Science, the overall organization. There are different chapters. So there was one in Vancouver. And actually, datacan was born from a side project from Women's in Data Science Vancouver. Of course, the activities of Women in Data Science are fairly restricted into the main event that they have in spring, but they wanted to do a little bit more. They wanted to have workshops. They wanted to have panel discussion. And this is how datacan was created. So really, the true heroes of datacan are the four main founders. We have Celine Leo, Natasha Madsen, as well as Jasmine. So they're really the true founder. And basically, when I joined them back in October last year, and I got involved with datacan, and we finally registered as a nonprofit this year. And really, ultimately, datacan is about promoting diversity in the field of data science, and it's about promoting inclusion, but it's also about providing information and providing a safe space for aspiring data scientists to enter the field. So we offer a workshop, technical workshop, soft skill workshops as well that we started more recently. So we have workshops, panel discussions. We have two main panel discussions topics. So we have these insider series that we're calling, which basically we will cover specific topics for specific job description. So we had one about ML ops. We had one about data analyst. So there's a few one coming up in the next few months. I was hoping to do one on DevRel, just so some of you might be interested and some of you might want to participate, might want to know a little bit more about that. So there was one coming up probably in August, which will be on computer vision. And I think that the most important thing also that is, of course, the one on computer vision is important, but one of the big things that we're going to do is a career fair. So that we did one last year. So I wasn't part of datacan back then, but still how it goes is that we are going to contact companies within the Vancouver area, but as well other companies if they have work from home position, if they allow work remotely. And we will ask them if they have some opening either for data analyst position, data scientist, data engineer. And what we do is that once we have job description, we will provide them to our followers on LinkedIn and to whoever who's interested. And then we will ask potential candidates to choose 3 companies for which they would like to apply according to the job position. And we will have them matched with companies. So, of course, we won't
Wow.
be able to match everyone, but we'll try to match as much as possible and as much as recruiters are able to interview. And on specific days, they will go through the interview process. So it's a way for us to support the industry, but also support the candidates to make the process easier. And we will try to offer some workshops as well for candidates to make the whole interview process a little bit
That's
easier for them.
invaluable.
Yes, so it should be happening this September. So we are still recruiting companies, and soon we will make the announcement for candidates. So follow us on LinkedIn, just search us, datacan.network, and you will see or you can go on the website. We also have a Slack channel. This is really important. We have a Slack channel. It's free. So if people wants to join in, if you have any questions about data science, if you have specific topics that you're uncomfortable with that you want to share, that either about statistics, machine learning, about the job interview process, about coding, about salary negotiation, about everything, well, feel free to stop by. We have few channels and you can ask your questions, and there's a bunch of us and we can provide you with the best information that we can get you. And it's all about supporting the community and making sure that we can move forward. So of course we're based in Vancouver, but it's open to anyone because everything is online now, so it's great.
That's amazing, Jean-Sebastien, with everything that you guys are doing. And I see you have a presence on YouTube where you can see past events, the recordings of the past events, and of course your Medium presence and everything that you described. I feel anybody that's going into the data analytics, data science space is just an invaluable resource, especially the one on the job hunting and the journey to apply and try and get your first job or second job and what have you. It's always so draining, and you feel like you're left alone with the wolves. So having a support system and somebody to help you through that journey is invaluable.
That's what we're trying to provide. So if it's helpful, then we did our job.
Thank you. And thank you again for coming on the Lights on Data show to talk about product analytics, marketing analytics. I encourage everybody to follow Jean-Sebastien Provost on LinkedIn if they wanted to learn more about these topics. And of course, check out the datacan.network to get all these valuable resources. Thank you again, everybody. And thank you, Jean-Sebastien.
Thank you very much, George, for having me. It was a lot of fun.